Peacemaker Season 2 has finally, after 8 long weeks, finished, and I'm sad to say this is without question the weakest project James Gunn has done. Now, I don't dislike this season. In fact, there are parts that I absolutely love, like that intro. It may not be nearly as incredible as Season 1's, but it's still fantastic. And also the song choice and dance sequences match the story a little better, so there's a nice bonus point for the intro. 10/10. But unfortunately, this season's parts are infinitely greater than the whole. This season follows Chris as he discovers this other mysterious world. He is feeling awful about himself because he tries to join the Justice Gang and realizes that he isn't respected as a hero at all. And after he tries to talk to Harcourt about a special moment they had, she shuts him down. So in his moment of weakness, he tries to explore this other world, and within the first couple hours, he accidentally kills his doppelganger and takes his place. In the universe, he is a famous superhero and works with his dad who loves him and his older brother who is still alive. But Argus is run by Rick Flag Sr., who wants revenge on Peacemaker for killing his son. And Rick Flag wants the device that Chris is using to get back and forth between dimensions for some unknown reason. This season is very frustrating for me, because on one hand, using the multiverse as temptation for our hero to have his perfect life is what I would call the best and really only amazing use the multiverse has outside of cheap fan service. And having Chris struggle to find any value in himself after killing his own dad and not being loved back by someone he fell in love with is ripe with potential. And to this show's credit, as far as character work goes, easy 11 out of 10. Like, I adore how this show handled Peacemaker and Harcourt. I think having their relationship being the emotional center for the story was a pretty risky choice, because I don't really think that they were being set up as a couple, and there was no hint at it except for one small scene at the very end of episode 8 last season. But they found a way to make me fully invested in Harcourt as a character, and her struggle with just dealing with her emotions, and the fact that she has them at all. Jennifer Holland brought her A game this season, and it made all the difference. And John Cena really shows just how much range he has as an actor. The other characters are really left in the dust for the most part. Adebayo has one really powerful scene where she lets go of her wife, and I really appreciate that James Gunn didn't add any jokes, which was my big critique for season 1. He didn't feel the need to cut the tension with a vigilante joke. He just let the scene breathe on its own, and it was all the better for it. Economos is pretty much the same, and Vigilante is a lot weaker for me than he is in season 1. And as strange as it's gonna sound, it's because he's not in his suit for the vast majority of the season. Now, I don't know if it's just me, but what made Vigilante so hilarious was the fact that he took himself so seriously to the point that he was in his suit as much as possible. Someone who is bafflingly stupid and annoying, but great at fighting and absolutely loves it. I appreciate the extra information we learned about him, but I really wish James wrote scenes that allowed him to be in the suit more. And building off that, I hate that we actually only see Peacemaker in his suit for one scene. After that one scene in episode 1, we never see him in his suit for the rest of the season. He's in Earth 2 Peacemaker suit, but it's never his own. It just removes a certain fun that season 1 had, and it's pretty disappointing. We did get 2 new characters, Fleury and Bordeaux. Fleury is my favorite character across the entire show. There wasn't a single moment where he wasn't the funniest character, and seeing him leave Argus to form Checkmate with the 11th Street Kids made me unbelievably happy. And his dynamic with Vigilante is actually the single greatest pairing in the history of television. If we do not get a season 3 with more of these two, I'm going to boycott DC. And Bordeaux's a bit of a miss for me. I like her in concept, but she does a complete 180, and I think it makes sense for her to flip on Rick Flag, but it was so rushed that it doesn't work. She goes from having this huge tension with Harcourt and saying she thinks it's okay to murder Peacemaker to working with both of them, and all because Flag did one thing she disagreed with. And all of this happens in one episode. We completely miss her for 2 or 3 episodes, and all of a sudden she's a good guy off screen. But once you look beyond the amazing character work, this season has some serious issues. And my big issue with the season is so massive that it actually damages the entire season for me to some degree. And that's the final scene of the show. The big thing that James Gunn was prepping everyone for ruins the season for me. And it's because it single-handedly sacrificed the entire season for a small hint at Man of Tomorrow and the greater DCU. If you don't already know, Rick Flag was working with Lex Luthor. Luthor helps Rick by supplying him with his goons, and Rick eventually finds a planet that seems uninhabited, but with clean air and drinkable water. His plan is to turn this into a prison for metahumans. So his first order of business is to kidnap Chris and strand him on this other Earth. So the season ends with Chris looking beyond the trees and hearing a horrifying sound, and the season ends. This was not built up to, like, at all. And not only that, James Gunn says he doesn't have a plan for season 3, which means he plans on resolving this in other projects. This isn't how you end a show or even a season. Seasons do end on cliffhangers all the time, but it's usually as a result of the story building to a climax and ending in the climax. This season wrapped up its main threat in the previous episode, then did this weird mishmash of following action in season 3, episode 1, and then leaves our main protagonist stranded. It wasn't built up to, and it was done to set up another project, and that infuriates me. And what's even more annoying is that this doesn't feel like the natural end to the episode. It feels like it was stitched on, because you have this opening song play over our heroes forming checkmate, and then a cut to black, and then immediately Chris is getting abducted and stranded on the other Earth. It just feels so stitched on last minute. And if you watch James Gunn's podcast, you find out that that's exactly what happened. He ended the story where it naturally reached its ending, and then his partner convinced him to add that on to tease Man of Tomorrow. This is exactly one of the biggest complaints that people had with Marvel and their shows, where they were sacrificing story for the greater MCU without a solid plan. Regardless of how you feel about this season, I think it's fair to say that James Gunn was going for a character study on two people learning to deal with their trauma and learning to accept that they are special to others even if they don't always feel it themselves. And I think that theme was wrapped up beautifully. I think the formation of Checkmate, while sloppy and rushed, was a natural ending for the show. And having Chris and Harcourt reconcile and start some foundation of a relationship was where the season should have ended. That's the story Gunn was trying to tell. But instead he forced this ending where we can no longer watch Peacemaker and just be happy with it. We have to watch Man of Tomorrow and onwards just to see if Chris makes it home. This season also lacks a proper external conflict. Rick Flag is antagonistic, but he doesn't go out of his way to be malicious until the final scene. Earth X should have been the big threat of the season, but we spend one episode where it's an issue and then we're done. I don't have an issue with the final fight being in the penultimate episode and the final episode being all falling action. But holy shit, did we spend as little time on Earth X as possible, and instead spent more time than we could afford in how Chris gets stranded on Earth X. Episode 1 and 2 should have been one episode, and 4 and 5 was just an episode split into two. Both those should have been condensed and have 2 whole extra episodes where our heroes have to escape Earth X. Because what they did with it was great, but it was so rushed. We spent 3 episodes where Argus just monitors Peacemaker's house and tries to break in. We spent 1 episode where our heroes understand that they're trapped on a planet where Nazis won World War II. That's a little ridiculous. Now, it's not all bad. In fact, each episode, aside from 4, are great on their own. And I truly believe episode 6 is the best episode of the show. But there isn't a strong overall story, and it's such a shame. I really wanted to love this, but it just doesn't work for me. Now, for anyone saying that this has completely shaken their confidence in James Gunn's ability to build out a universe, like, come on, guys, let's not go that far. Yes, this was definitely the worst project, and it was definitely a bit of a blunder, but the MCU had its fair share of misses too. We had The Incredible Hulk, Thor: The Dark World, and Captain Marvel, and one of those was in between 2 of the greatest movies to ever come out of the MCU. Mistakes happen, people overextend sometimes. This isn't that big a deal. And if you're saying that Salvation Run was a mediocre story, I understand that. But also, the MCU took a big risk with Guardians of the Galaxy, and everyone ended up loving it, even though they were definitely not very popular characters in the comics. I think it's fair to say that this season was weak, and that structurally, if all other projects are like this, then we should be worried. But I don't think it's fair to say, oh, because he's going with this story, we should be worried. Because unless I'm mistaken, from what I could research, this is part of a build-up to Final Crisis, where Darkseid is the main villain. And it's a pretty massive Darkseid story that I thought a lot of people really loved. So this seems like he's building up to exactly what most of the people want him to build up to. It's just not how we expected it. So let's chill out. This was a rough season. It's not the end of the world here. Now, if Supergirl and the Lantern show are not good, and then Man of Tomorrow is also not incredible, then we can start saying that this is a total shit show. But let's give it some time. Guys, if you made it this far into the video, I can't state how much I appreciate it. Please leave a like and consider hitting the subscribe button. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, take care.